On a Sunday afternoon in November 1970, two girls walking with their father in a Norwegian valley found a woman lying among the rocks. Every label had been cut out of her clothes. The marks had been scraped off her belongings. She was carrying nothing that could say who she was. In a locker at the railway station, police found her suitcases. Inside were passports in a string of names that were not hers, and a notebook written in code. 56 years later, nobody has ever established her name. But in 2017, her teeth told investigators where she grew up. The valley is called Isdalen, the Ice Valley. Locals had another name for it, Dødsdalen, the Valley of Death. After a long history of accidents and disappearances going back centuries. On the 29th of November 1970, a university professor took his two young daughters walking there. Among the rocks, partly hidden from the path, they found the burned body of a woman. Around her, arranged in a way that never sat right with investigators, was a small collection of things. Scattered sleeping pills, a bottle of liquor, a fur hat that later tested positive for petrol, and a pair of rubber boots set down neatly beside her. There was no handbag, no wallet, no papers, nothing at all that could give her a name, and everything she owned had been stripped of anything that could identify her. The labels had been cut out of her clothes, not torn out, cut carefully with scissors. The maker's marks had been scraped off a bottle of pills, and the prescription label was gone. Her fingertips had been sanded down. Working from a luggage receipt, police traced two suitcases to a locker at Bergen railway station. Both had been wiped clean of fingerprints. Inside were wigs, non-prescription glasses, foreign currency from several countries, some of it sewn into the lining, a tube of eczema cream, several silver spoons, and more clothing with the labels cut out. There were also passports, not one, a series of them in a string of different names. None of the names belonged to a real person, and there was a black notebook filled with rows of numbers. When police broke the code, it did not turn out to be secret messages. It was a diary. Each line was a date and a place. She had been recording her own movements across Europe in cipher so that nobody else could read them. From hotel registration cards, police traced her across Norway. She had checked in under at least 7 or 8 different names. Staff at those hotels remembered her clearly. She was elegant, carefully dressed, and traveling alone at a time when very few women did. She spoke German, French, English, and possibly Flemish, with an accent that nobody could place. She told people she was a traveling saleswoman and an antiques dealer. There is no record of her doing any business at all. She had been moving through Norway since at least March that year, checking in, staying a few nights, checking out, then reappearing somewhere else under another name. The names were mostly Belgian-sounding: Genevieve, Claudia, Alexia, Fenella. None of them traced back to a living person, and staff who served her described the same woman every time: self-assured, unapproachable, careful. And in all those months, across all those hotels, not one photograph of her was ever taken. And at hotel after hotel, she asked to change rooms, always to a room where she could see the entrance. One waitress remembered her sitting in a hotel dining room directly beside 2 German naval officers, saying nothing to them at all. On the 23rd of November, 1970, she checked out of her hotel in Bergen. She asked for the bill quickly, and she paid in cash. 6 days later, 2 girls found her in the valley. The autopsy raised more questions than it answered. She had taken a large quantity of barbiturate sleeping pills. Blood analysis suggested more than 50 of them. But the pills alone did not kill her. The cause of death was recorded as a combination of that overdose and carbon monoxide poisoning. There was soot deep in her lungs. She was breathing when the fire started, and there was a heavy bruise on her neck, consistent with a blow or with a serious fall. The police recorded a verdict of probable suicide. Almost nobody has ever been satisfied with it. The theory that filled the gap was espionage. This was 1970. Bergen sat close to Norwegian naval installations, and the Cold War ran straight through northern Europe. Bergen was a naval city. The Norwegian coast was one of the most closely watched stretches of water in Europe, with Soviet submarine traffic running through it and NATO listening from the shore. Some researchers have pointed out that the dates in her coded diary line up with periods of Norwegian missile testing. The Penguin was an anti-ship missile in development along that coast through the late 60s and into 1970. Set her diary against those dates and the overlap is there. Set it against the ordinary itinerary of someone selling antiques, and much of it overlaps too. The false names, the cut labels, the sanded fingertips, the cipher. Taken together, it reads like tradecraft. It is also the only story that makes every detail cohere at once. That is exactly why it gets repeated, and exactly why it needs handling carefully. But this needs saying plainly. No intelligence service has ever been connected to her. No agency has ever claimed her. In 56 years, no document has ever placed her in anyone's employment. No defector has ever named her. No file has surfaced in any archive opened since the Cold War ended. Nothing in 56 years. The spy theory is the most repeated thing about this case, and the least supported. There are quieter explanations. A woman running from something in her own life. A woman with a history that made anonymity feel necessary. And everything that reads as tradecraft also reads as somebody hiding from a person rather than from a state. A false name works the same way in both stories. The one thing the evidence does establish is that the erasure was hers. She cut those labels herself. She was buried in Bergen in 1971 in a zinc coffin in case she ever needed to be exhumed. The police filmed the funeral in case somebody came to it. In 2016, the case was reopened. Someone found a rucksack of her belongings that had been sitting in Bergen Police Headquarters unexamined since 1970. It held a prescription bottle, a map, and other small personal effects. Exactly the kind of material modern forensics could have worked with decades earlier. It had been catalogued in 1970, and then simply never looked at again. Her jaw had also been kept. Her dentistry was unusual. Gold crowns, work not commonly done in Norway. So it had been preserved in a forensic archive rather than buried with her. It is the reason there was anything left to test at all. Almost everything else had gone into the ground in 1971. In 2017, investigators at Kripos and the University of Bergen ran a stable isotope analysis on her teeth. It was the first time Norwegian police had used the technique. Tooth enamel absorbs strontium and oxygen from food and water as it forms. The chemical signature locked into it is a record of where a person was living when each tooth grew. The result was far more specific than the team had hoped for. She was probably born around 1930, in or near Nuremberg, and the teeth that formed in her teens carried a different signature. She had moved west as a child, into the border country between Germany, France, Luxembourg, and Belgium, possibly just before or during the war, which means the years that shaped her were the years Europe was tearing itself apart. It matched an earlier analysis of her handwriting, which had suggested she was educated in France. So we know roughly where she was born. We know roughly where she grew up. We know she moved west as a child in the years around the Second World War. We know she spoke 4 languages, traveled under a string of names that belonged to nobody, and wrote down where she had been in a code of her own making. And in 56 years, with all of that, nobody has ever come forward to say they knew her. If you want to see the next case history can't fully close, subscribe.